Welcome back, class. We'll now begin lecture set number 7, examining stress, lifestyle, and health, chapter 14, and industrial organizational psychology, chapter 13. While discussing stress, we'll understand stress and its causes, identify stressors and type of stress, and understand the impact of stress on health. And then we'll look at the key items of IO psychology, or industrial organizational psychology, define the role of IO psychology, understand the history of IO psychology, and understand key areas of industrial organizational psychology. So let's start off our discussion with stress with some everyday examples. Of course, as you're aware, exams are stressful, but unavoidable element of college life. So we do experience stress on various fronts. Graduating from college and entering the workforce can also be viewed as a stressor as well, a threat or loss of financial support, or a challenge, an opportunity for independence of growth. So how it is that we deal with these various types of stressors will determine to some extent the quality of our life. So when we examine these areas, particularly as we're looking at health psychology, who's interested in these things, emotion as well as personality, attitudes, behaviors, and responses to stress can have an impact on our overall health. Health psychology studies these impacts as part of the broader field of behavioral medicines. Topics of the study of health psychology include the phases of stress response and adaptation, how stress and health are affected by the appraisal of the stressor, its severity, various personality types, how much control you actually have or your perceived amount of control, emotion or problem focus, optimism, social support structures there, exercise, relaxation, and religious faith and participation all have an impact on our health and our stress levels. So, stress, a primary focus of health psychology. Many people report being affected by stress. Some terms psychology use to talk about stress are a stressor is an event or condition which we view as threatening, challenging, or overwhelming, like poverty, an explosion, a psychology test, loud noises, and so on. Appraisal. Appraisal refers to deciding whether to view something as a stressor or not. And then stress reaction refers to any emotional and physical responses to the stressor, such as rapid heartbeat or elevated cortisol levels and crying. So stress refers to the process of appraising and responding to events which we consider threatening or challenging. So the process of appraising and responding to events which we consider threatening or challenging. So let's look at some stressors. There may be a spectrum of levels of intensity and persistence of stressors. We can also see stressors as falling into one of four categories. We have catastrophes, significant life changes, chronic daily hassles, or low social status or power. So catastrophes, significant life changes, daily hassles, and then low social status or low power. These are stressors on a sort of scale. So stressor refers to the events and conditions that trigger our stress response because they are perceived, appraised as overwhelmingly challenging, threatening, and or harmful. So we have a stressor. A person judges its potential threat and then determines if effective options are available to manage the situation. Stress is likely to result if a stressor is perceived as extremely threatening or threatening with few or no effective coping options available. We have a stressor. We perform the primary appraisal, challenge or threat. If it's a challenge, we may see it as a potential for gain or growth. If it's a threat, this may lead to harm, loss, or negative consequences. Then we go through a second appraisal. Potential options and how effective are they? If we have effective options, we'll see it as a low threat. If the options are ineffective or there are no options, then we have a high threat. So it all starts with a stressor and how we appraise it. Do we see it as a challenge or a threat? And if it is a threat, Are there effective or no effective options available? So clarifying the components of stress. Stress isn't something that happens to you. It's a process in which you participate. The process includes the stressor or event or condition, your cognitive appraisal, your body's response, and your coping strategies. The advantage of breaking stress into these components is that we can see options for altering each of these different factors. Now, let's look at your stress level. As stress level increases, as we see at the bottom of this graph, from low to moderate, so does performance. So we can see this bell-shaped curve here. We have eustress, which sometimes is deemed as helpful, on one side, and distress on the high end of the stress level. So at the optimal level, the peak of the curve, performance has reached its peak. So our most optimal performance is normally going to be seen at the high peak level here, the moderate level of stress. Not exactly eustress or distress, but the exact middle, the optimal level of performance. If stress exceeds the optimal level, it will reach a distress region, which will become excessive and debilitating. So the idea is this: you're taking an exam, let's say an in-class exam, and if you're so stressed out about this exam, its ramifications and things of that nature, you may be so stressed out that you are not going to be able to even think about generating the proper answers correctly. But if you're so unstressed by it, you're almost practically asleep. So the moderate level of stress is going to be seen more likely to be optimal to our performance. We've seen there have been a great deal of changes in the last few years when it comes to one's stress level. It seems that there's been an increase in 44%, a decrease by 25%, and about 30 or so percent stayed the same. We see there are demographic groups, for example. The charts above, adapted from Cohen and Janicki Diverts, depict the mean stress level scores among different demographic groups during the years 83, 2006, and 2009 across categories of sex, race, educational level, employment status, income, and so on. So we can see, based on these demographic groups, they are different levels of stress that people are perceiving. So appraisal. Choosing how to view a situation. Obviously, from what we've discussed so far, it's a key aspect to how it is that we may ultimately deal with the stress in our lives. Questions to ask yourself when facing a possible stressor: is this a challenge and will I tackle it? Or is it overwhelming and will I give up? So there are few conditions that are inherently and universally stressful. We can often choose our appraisal and our responses. Extreme, chronic physical threats or challenges such as noise or starvation. These are few. So we normally, in our day-to-day, we're not really having these very significant type of stressful events. Our stressful events that we will experience on a day-to-day basis are usually going to be something that technically we could probably handle. The stressful event of a tough math test, your appraisal of it. Threat, yikes, this is beyond me, or challenge, I've got to apply all I know. So the idea is that what they're communicating here is the notion that your stress is going to be to a large extent depending on how you appraise it. Now, also, we should understand that there are beneficial as well as harmful stress effects. A brief experience of stress can be beneficial, improving the immune system response, motivating action, focusing priorities, feeling engaged and energized, providing challenges that encourage growth, knowledge, and self-esteem. Extreme or prolonged stress can cause problems, however. Mental and physical coping systems become overwhelmed and defeated rather than strengthened. Immune function and other health factors decline because of damage. The key factor is whether there is a chance for recovery and healing. So basically, when you have a brief exposure to stress, it can be seen as very beneficial and helpful. When that stress period lasts a long time and you're still in that stress mode, that's when it can become particularly dangerous. And of course, we may recall that if you are stressed for any significant amount of time, you tend to catch colds, okay, and become infected with things simply because your immune system is not going to be operating at its optimal level when we have a lot of stress. The energy required for you to deal with those stressful events is being taken away from your immune system. Therefore, your immune system is not operating at its peak level. Catastrophic events and conditions. Well, appraisal is not essential in a catastrophic event. Most people will agree that the event is harmful and overwhelming. An example includes such things as floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, and things of that nature. The short-term effects include increased heart attacks on the day of the event. Long-term effects will include such things as depression, nightmares, anxiety, and flashbacks. But we do also see that bonding can occur too. Both the trauma and the recovery are shared with others, and you can get really tight and close knit to people who have shared some sort of catastrophic event with you. Major life changes also represents an area of stress that we can experience. Even if it's a happy life change, such as marriage, starting college, or what have you, it does bring about increased challenge of stress. Change is often challenging. New roles, new priorities, and new tasks are going to put a strain on our coping resources. The challenge and the negative impact on health increases when the changes are painful, such as a death in the family, a loss of job, or a heart attack, and the changes are in a cluster, and there are too many at once, where things just keep happening one, two, three, one, two, three, and you're not having the capability to recuperate from the previous stressful event that was a negative impact on you. Chronic daily difficulties. Daily difficulties can be caused by facing too many tasks, too little time, and too little control, something that oftentimes we will experience. Daily difficulties can be caused by the lack of social power and freedom, being bullied, living in poverty, living under oppressive political conditions. These are the daily hassles that we see from time to time. They can add up and become somewhat of a major event for an individual. So, what's happening when we're experiencing all of this stress? Well, the body's stress response system is happening. When encountering a sudden trauma or other stressor, our body acts to increase our resistance to threat and harm. Phase 1. The fight or flight sympathetic nervous system responds, reducing pain and increasing the heart rate. The core of the adrenal glands produces norepinephrine and epinephrine. This system was identified by Walter Cannon. It gives us energy too. The brain sends signals to the outer part of the adrenal glands to produce cortisol and other stress hormones. These focus us on planning adaptive coping strategies and resisting defeat by the stressor. This was looked at by Hans Seeley in 1907 to 1982 is when he lived, and identified this extended phase as well. This can lead to, ultimately, exhaustion. Systems begin to sort of shut down. So the general adaptation syndrome, or GAS, identified by Seeley, our stressor response system defends, then fatigues. So phase 1, alarm reaction, we mobilize our resources with the fight or flight. Phase 2, resistance. The body's resistance to stress can only last so long before exhaustion sets in. So we are resisting and coping with the stressors, but then if it goes on too long, it just starts to overwhelm us, and then we go into the exhaustion phase. Our reserves that we've been employing to fight these stressors have become depleted. So this has led to a lot of stress-illness relationships. We're examining and research these things. How does stress increase our risk of disease? This is the subject of study of psychoneuroimmunology, the study of how interacting psychological, neural, and endocrine processes affect health. Psychologists no longer use the term psychosomatic because it has come to mean imagined illness. But no, stress can cause real illnesses. We now refer to it as psychophysiological illness, a real illness caused in part by psychological factors such as the experience of stress. So, how the immune system works before stress plays a role. We have intruders. Is it bacterial infection? The response, send in B lymphocytes such as this one shown in front of a macrophage. Is it a cancer cell virus or other foreign substance? Respond to send in T lymphocytes such as this one. Is it some other harmful intruder or perhaps worn out cell needing to be cleaned up? We respond by sending in macrophages such as this large one shown here, which is about to trap and destroy a tiny bacterium. Are there disease cells, such as infected by viruses or cancers, that need to be cleaned out? Response, we send in natural killer cells, or NK cells, such as the two shown here, attacking a cell affected by cancer. So our immune system is very well suited to attack a variety of different types of intruders into our body. Stress increases the risk of illness. So stressor, we appraise it. Thoughts and feelings are going to be aligned with it. Brain signals, hormonal action, and then we have immune suppression, which leads to a risk of illness. So here we see psychoneuroimmunology in action. Psychological factors such as an appraisal, thoughts and feelings. Neurological factors such as the brain signals engaging the stress response system. Immunology such as stress hormone exposure, which suppress the immune system. Therefore, when all this is taken into consideration, when this process is happening, we're more likely to get sick. So, looking at the impact of stress, the graph here shows the percentages of participants who developed colds after reporting having experienced chronic stressors lasting at least 1 month, 3 months, and 6 months. Telomeres are shorter in adults who experience more trauma as children. Telomeres, just to refresh your memory, are those things within our body that sort of determine how well we copy our genes or copy our cells. And these telomeres, when they start to become shortened, okay, as we get older, that seems to give us the sign of age, that we're aging. So telomeres are sort of associated with our longevity and our aging systems. Effective prolonged stress. The gas system works well for single exposure to stress. Repeated and prolonged stress with too much phase 3 time leads to various signs of physical deterioration and premature aging. The production of new neurons declines, neural circuits in the brain break down, the DNA telomeres, the chromosome tips shorten. Cells lose ability to divide, cells die, tissue stops regenerating, early aging and death is the result. We do see there are certain differences between females and males when it comes to stress. In response to a stressor such as the death of a loved one, women may tend and befriend, that is, nurture themselves and others and bond together. The bonding hormone oxytocin may play a role in this bonding. Women show behavioral and neurological signs of becoming more empathetic under stress. Men under stress are more likely to socially withdraw and numb themselves with alcohol. Men are also more likely to become aggressive under stress. In either case, men's behavior and brains show less empathy and less tuning in to others when under stress. Stress from normal activities. Some typically daily life events such as moving can be significant stressor even when the move is intentional. Daily commutes, whether on the road via public transportation, can be hassles that contribute to our feelings of everyday stress. So we do see stress, and stress is a part of life. We do experience it in just about everything that we do. Some sort of stress that's going on. receive stress from occupations, police officers, firefighters, military personnel, and combat zones. All of these provide stressors to all of us humans. But also there are personality traits that may have an impact on stress too. We've talked about type A and type B people. Type A individuals are characterized as intensely driven, while type B people are characterized as laid back and relaxed. So you can see that these personality traits, these tendencies of how we feel, think, and behave over a variety of situations may make us, if we're type B, more laid back when stressors are happening, whereas type A, we're going to be a lot more driven when these stressors are presented to us. Stress and heart disease. In coronary heart and artery disease, the blood vessels that provide oxygen and nutrients to the heart muscle itself become clogged and narrowed and closed. Many factors contribute to heart disease. Biological, genetic predisposition to high blood pressure and high cholesterol. Behavioral, smoking, inactivity, and high fat diet. Psychological, chronic stress and personality styles that worsen the experience of stress. So going back again to this idea, type A personality. People with a type A personality are impatient, verbally aggressive, and always pushing themselves and others to achieve. While people with a type B personality are more relaxed and go with the flow. In one study, heart attacks only struck people with a type A traits. Accomplishing goals is healthy, but a compulsion to always be working with little time spent smelling the flowers, so to speak, is not. So, the point, a problem is anger. To reduce anger-related stress, diffuse anger with excessive exercise and talking, forgiveness, not letting it out, screaming and punching. We also see pessimism and heart disease. It can be helpful to realistically anticipate negative events that may happen and to plan how to prevent or cope with them, but pessimism is not. Pessimism refers to the assumption that negative outcomes will happen and often facing them by complaining and or giving up. We can see here the percentage of people developing coronary heart disease by their attitudes toward life. We have the optimist, everything's going to be rosy, everything's going to work out fine. We can see they are the least likely to have development of coronary heart disease, followed by the people who are neither pessimists or optimists, the neutrals. But look at the pessimists. Their percentage of developing coronary heart disease is much greater. So men who are generally pessimistic are more likely to develop heart disease within 10 years than optimists are. We also see depression in heart disease. Why does depression appear so often with heart disease? Does one cause the other? One possible answer is the two problems are both caused by stress. There may be intervening variable, for example, excessive inflammation. But the idea is that chronic stressors are usually going to also be related not only to depressive symptoms, but cardiac disease too. So far what we've seen here are a variety of factors that do point to what can make stress, our experience of stress, much worse for us as a specific human being. So the health consequences of chronic stress, the repeated release of stress hormones, such as cortisol, helps our bodies respond to brief stress. Chronically high cortisol levels damage the body, however. So we have persistent stressors and negative emotions, release the stress hormones, automatic nervous system effects, headaches, high blood pressure, immune suppression, heart disease. Persistent stressors and negative emotion also can lead to unhealthy behaviors, smoking, drinking, and so on. Coping with stress and promoting health. How to go from coping to thriving. We look at problem-focused and emotion-focused coping, perceived control and learned helplessness, benefits of optimism and social support, reducing stress effects in aerobic exercise, the power of faith communities, and complementary and alternative. So coping with stress, problem or emotion focused coping. Problem focused coping means reducing the stressors, such as by working out a conflict or tackling a difficult project. Emotion focused coping means reducing the emotional impact of stress by getting support, comfort, and perspective from others. So the risk of problem focus, magnifying emotional distress, especially if trying to change something that's difficult to change. The risk from emotion focused, ignoring the problem. We might focus on this style of coping when we perceive the stressor as something we cannot change. The idea of learned helplessness. This is the basic idea that you have an uncontrollable bad event, and then you look at whether or not you have control over it, and then the result. So an experiment by Martin Seligman, give a dog no chance of escape from repeated shocks. Sounds cruel, doesn't it? The result, it will give up on trying to escape the pain even when later it has the option to do so. What happens is when we have made that option not available for some time, the organism will just learn that they have no control. They have lack of control totally. This leads to learned helplessness. Declining to help oneself after repeated attempts to do so have failed. You just become helpless. All right? Personal control. When people are given some choices, not too many, they tend to thrive. Normally, most creatures try to escape or end a painful situation, but experience can make us lose hope. So learned helplessness is sort of like a loss of hope. You sort of give in to having no control over the environment. When people don't have control, it can cause quite a bit of stress. Control in our hands makes us feel better. So stress factor perceived level of control. The left and middle rats below received shock. The rat on the left was able to turn off the shocks for both rats. Which rat had the worst health and stress problems? Only the middle subordinate rat had increased ulcers. It is not the level of shock, but the level of control over the shock which created the stress. So this leads us to the idea of external and internal locus of control. Our perception of where the seat of power over our lives is located, locus of control. Internal locus of control, we feel that we are in charge of ourselves and our circumstances. External locus of control, we picture that a force outside of ourselves controls our fate. So internal locus of control, too much internal locus of control, we blame ourselves for bad events or have the illusion that we have the power to prevent bad events. With external locus of control, too much external locus of control, we lose initiative, lose motivation to achieve, have more anxiety about what might happen to us, and don't bother developing willpower.